artists, and welcome to day 57 of the epic journey. I'm Dalene FM, and today we're going to be talking about the sheen on graphite and how to best avoid it as much as possible. Now, what I've got here in front of you is a drawing that I did quite some time ago that I abandoned for various reasons. The main reason, of course, was because I felt that if you watched my previous videos, you will have known from me saying repeatedly that I like a fine tooth stock, and the stock that I was drawing on here had too much of a tooth for my liking, and I was getting quite a granular effect in some of the lighter tones. We're going to talk about how to reduce that as well. But the main reason was because I was far too impatient when I started doing this drawing, and if I move this piece of paper around, I'm sure the camera will pick up how much of a sheen there is on that graphite. And the reason that I got so much of a sheen on that graphite was because I was just far too patient and I went in for the kill far too early. So we're going to talk about how to avoid doing that and what is the best way to build up your tones so as not to get too much of a sheen on your paper. I'm going to work on the same drawing. This drawing has been knocking around my art room for some time now, so it's looking a little bit worse for wear. But I want to show you how, when you go in for the kill, how you're going to get that sheen. Because what it in fact is doing, now have a look at that, you'll see that that's got the same sheen on it. I've gone really deep dark values right off the bat, and what I've in fact done is I've damaged the paper, because this paper's got quite a nice tooth on it, and I've squashed the tooth, so I've created a smooth surface underneath that graphite, which is then accentuating the fact that graphite itself is already quite reflective. So what I need to do is to just be more patient and start building up my tones gradually. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to an HB. I'll do it next to this so that you can see. Let me zoom in a bit. Okay, so I'm going to start much slower. Be much more gradual in my building up. You can see it's picking up the tooth of the paper, and that is where the graphite is touching the tops of the paper. It's not squashing the tooth of the paper down. If I put a little bit more pressure on, we'll see that the tooth of the paper becomes much more obvious. And I eventually get to the point where I've now loaded my paper with as much graphite as I can without it actually starting to squash the tooth. Now I'm going to get a brush and I'm going to brush that. Just going to work it into the tooth. Now you must use a clean brush for this so that you don't get your graphite looking all dirty. I'm not a big fan of rubbing with your finger and with a brush because of the fact that it can look quite grey and smudged. But in a case like this where you're trying to build up your graphite, it does work really well. I'm still with my HB at this point. Changing direction as well also helps, because then you can get into different parts of the tooth. And I go back to the brush again, work it into the tooth. Now you can see that I'm starting to fill the tooth in that area there. There's nowhere near as much white of tooth showing. I'm still using my HB. But as you can see, I'm starting to get to a point now where my HB is not making a very big difference to the value. Again, work it in with a brush. Now I can step up my gradient. I can go up to a 4B. I know a lot of artists tend to do this in a 2B. That's great. That will work just as well. I just don't have a 2B at the moment, so I started with an HB. You can start with a 2B. I'm not putting a lot of pressure on because I don't want to damage the tooth of my canvas. Again, we can cross hatch it, so we're filling it from different directions. I'm putting a medium pressure on here, trying not to damage the surface of my paper. I can then go back to my brush. Now you can see each time you brush it, it goes ever so slightly lighter. And that's fine, because you're just getting rid of some of the excess graphite that's on there. Again, similar pressure. The angle of your pencil is also quite important at this point. You're trying to get into the tooth, so a low angle is quite a good idea. Of course, if you're wanting more detail in a highly toned area, you would lift the angle of your pencil. Go back to my brush, work it into the tooth. And now I can go down to a 6B if I wish. Now you can see we're starting to get some nice deep value here. Again, work it into the tooth. And then to finish it off, I can go down to an 8B if I really want to get some deep values. Look, the value that I've got here is really deep, so you shouldn't really need to go much deeper than this. But if I really, really want some deep values, I can come over it with an HB. With an 8B. And brush off the excess. Artists, as you can see, the value that I'm getting on this little patch that I've drawn is very similar to the value that I've got there, but it is nowhere near as shiny as that one. You will always get a certain amount of shine on your graphite. Don't fool yourself into thinking that graphite is not going to give you shine. It will. Graphite is a very reflective medium, so there is still a certain amount of graphite on. Sorry, there is still a certain amount of reflection on there, and I'm sure the camera will pick it up. I can see it there as I'm going, but it is nowhere near the kind of reflection that we've got there. This has not damaged the paper in the same way as this has, because I put pressure on there, really squashed the tooth down, and created some unhappy gouges in the stock, which you're never really going to get rid of. And if you can see in areas like this here, you can actually see the directionality of my pencil as I was working, because the grooves and the damage that I've created in the paper is what is causing the reflection on that graphite. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to set this aside, and I'm going to do a similar exercise on a very heavily tooth piece of stock. Let's have a look and see how we can get a nice even gradient on a very strong tooth. Okay, again I'm working with my HB. A medium pressure. I'm really just letting the weight of the pencil do the talking at this point. Now there you can really see the tooth of the paper coming through. It's a very heavy tooth compared to the one that I was working on just now. I'll go through the same procedure. Work the graphite into the tooth. You can see it knocks back that white of the tooth of the paper. It doesn't completely get rid of it, but it's knocking it back so it's nowhere near as bright little marks sticking up through the graphite. Sticking with my HB for the moment. I feel I can now go down to my 4B. This is my 4B pencil. Same kind of pressure. There's a lot more graphite in a 4B than there is in an HB, so you really don't need any more pressure than what you were working with before. Back to my brush. Still with my 4B. Now I can go to my 6B. And finally, my 8B. I'm surprised at how few artists work with an 8B. Even some of the big name artists that are teaching do so little work with an 8B, and that does surprise me. I would imagine it's probably got something to do with the sheen on the paper and having to do a lot of pressure to get the 8B in there. But there's a lot of graphite in 8B, and you don't have to. Let me do it on a piece of clean paper so you can see how lightly I'm pressing. So I'm not damaging the tooth of the paper at all here. I'm just filling it up. Right, now we'll again, I'll go in for the kill here to try and fill that paper. You can see it's a lot heavier tooth than the paper I was working with before, so I've really got to damage this paper to get the graphite into the tooth of the paper. And again, let me just move it around so that the camera can pick up. You see how much more shine there is on the one that's damaged the paper than the one that hasn't. Okay, we've still got a bit of a shine there, but it's nowhere near the intensity of the 8B that has been damaging the paper. Right, now let's do the same exercise on a piece of paper that's got little or no tooth on it. This is my favorite paper to use. Hardly any tooth on this paper. And we're going to do exactly the same procedure. Now what you'll see here is the pencil is going to be a lot easier to build up because of the lack of tooth. But because the paper is so smooth, we're also going to get a tendency to build up shine a lot easier. So we've got to be quite careful when we're working with a fine tooth paper. Now there still is a certain amount of tooth on this paper. It's just much finer than the paper I was working with before. Now you can actually already see the sheen starting to develop. I don't know if the camera is picking that up, but I can certainly see it. Right, let me go down to my 4B. Still with the 4B. And now let's go to the 8B. Okay, so now what I'm going to do to just compare, I'm going to go in for the kill again. Let's really work this 8B with some serious pressure. And there again, let's hope the camera picks it up. But you're going to be able to see quite a lot more sheen on this one than on this one. Can you see that? Now artists, please remember, you are never going to be able to put down graphite that has got zero sheen on it. Graphite is naturally quite a shiny substance. But this is probably going to be the best way that you can eliminate or to decrease the sheen that is appearing on your graphite. Basically, what it's going to take is patience. Patience, build up your value slowly, starting from a harder pencil, lay down your graphite, bring it up to your softer pencil where you've got more graphite going down so that you don't flatten the tooth of your paper. Artists, I hope this has helped you to understand what is possibly wrong with your graphite, why it's getting too much shine on it, and how to best solve that problem. If it has, then please will you like and share and spread it around the internet, and don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel, and I will see you tomorrow in day 58. Thank you so much for joining me. Bye. That's what you want to do.